Our next guest is a good friend, a longtime colleague in the fight to protect Social Security, Medicare, and the other benefits that are so important to the American people. We've been fighting this fight for a long time through a number of administrations now. Nancy Altman is she is president of Social Security Works. She is chairman of the board of the Pension Rights Center, and she is also, through Social Security Works sponsors this program. So we have a number of ties here, and she joins us now. Nancy, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let me start out by asking you this question that I've asked myself, or we've asked each other. How does media, something like sponsoring a media program, fit into the whole challenge we have of trying to protect and expand a program like Social Security?
There has been a literally billionaire-funded campaign to undermine confidence and support in Social Security. President Eisenhower called people who oppose Social Security, the millionaire and billionaire class that opposed it, a small splinter group. They're small in number. I think he said they were negligible in number, but they have oversized influence because of their money. And unfortunately, they control mainstream media, and they are able to get a false message out that has convinced too many Americans that Social Security is unaffordable, it won't be there, which is a lie. We are the wealthiest country in the world at the wealthiest moment in our history. There's no question we can afford Social Security. This is a fight about values. They try to make it a fight about misinformation.
Yeah, they really, it constantly amazes me how much they've permeated the mainstream media landscape. And to a certain extent, I understand it better. For example, last year I went to the Fiscal Summit that's put on every year by Pete Peterson's foundation. He's the billionaire who's probably been the most determined over the years to undermine Social Security. And so many mainstream media figures were there, presumably getting paid to host events and to attend. You know, John Harwood and Dana Bash and all these people come every year, and they get kind of steeped in this culture of we can't afford it, these deceptive numbers, this tricky accounting that they do where they mix up Medicare and Social Security funds and show you scary trend lines and that without talking about how people have paid into the program for themselves. I'm always amazed. Then you see something like Martha Raddatz in 2012 at the vice presidential debate saying something, and I'm quoting almost verbatim, if not verbatim, well, everybody knows that Social Security is going broke.
And she's not the only one. I mean, that's what's so insidious about this. It's bad enough that it can show up on the editorial pages, but if you go back and look at all the recent presidential debates and vice presidential debates, whenever there's a question about Social Security, it's essentially a rhetorical question. Everybody knows we've got to cut this program. How do you plan to cut it? You know, that's not, should we expand it? Should we cut it? So it gets through there, and papers like the Washington Post, it doesn't just show up on their editorial page, it infiltrates their news, their front page headlines, and the way the articles are framed. So it's very insidious, and it's left this impression. It's not an accident that so many young people do not believe they will get Social Security, when of course they will. But the reason is because any person who's following the issue even sort of superficially will be bombarded with all of this. And unfortunately, during the Bush administration, you call the hotline of the Social Security Administration, you get bombarded with the same thing.
And now, and we even saw it under President Obama, where was it 2011, I think it was, that his presidential budget included an indirect cut to Social Security benefits through what they call the chain CPI, which didn't keep up.
Stingy cost of living increase.
Yeah, reducing the cost of living increase well below what the real cost of living increase would be for a senior, for example, or a disabled person. And because it had been so inculcated in the quote-unquote bipartisan culture of Washington, that both parties kind of believed this.
Well, it's interesting. Until recently, the dividing line was not Republicans, Democrats. It was the elites, the insiders in New York and Washington, the media elites and the political elites, and the American people. Poll after poll after poll showed that Tea Partiers agreed with the most progressive of the country that Social Security is more important than ever, that we definitely shouldn't cut it, and we'd like to see it expanded. Now the Democrats have started waking up from this, mindset that they were.
This consensual hallucination, or whatever you call it.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're talking with Nancy Altman, who is president of Social Security Works, about the media blackout and it has been, in my sense, a blackout. Reports would come out. I'm thinking of different reports that have come out over the years, including National Academy of Social Insurance a few years back, talking about did a poll showing that people would be willing to pay a couple dollars more per month in return for an expanded Social Security program. Nothing about that in the mainstream media. That 74% of Russians, excuse me, I've been watching this Trump stuff. 74% of Republican voters wanted to see.
Well, some people would say that's the same.
Yeah. 74% of Republican voters were opposed to cuts to Social Security. At the same time that I think 16 out of 17 or 15 out of 17 Republican presidential candidates were talking about cutting Social Security. So you see these disconnects that never make it into the media. And I guess one of the reasons why we're working together now is that I think we've both been trying to fight this in our different ways for so long now.
Yes, it's really, I think, been extremely healthy for our democracy that we have access to social media, we have the internet, we have television stations like this one, that you're not just locked into CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox. You have some control, and the goal is to get that information out enough so that politicians get it and start talking about it. And once that happens, the mainstream media will have to talk about it, but it starts with the grassroots and with shows like this.
Well, let me ask you a question. It's kind of an off-the-wall question, but do you have anything like a favorite moment? It can be in conversation with a politician, it can be doing a media interview, or just talking to somebody on the street. Do you have a favorite moment where you were able to get a kind of aha?
Oh, I have my very favorite moment, and that is that there was all this talk in 2010 of how the budget is, Social Security is killing the budget.
Right.
We've got to cut it and I was asked to testify before the Finance Committee. Senator Max Baucus was then chairing it. Sitting next to me was part of the anti-Social Security crowd who wound up being a public trustee named Chuck Blehaus.
Oh, yeah.
So I said in my testimony, Social Security does not add a penny to the deficit. And I could see Baucus wrote it down, and when our statements had been made, he turned to Mr. Blehaus and said, now, Ms. Altman says it doesn't add to the deficit. Now, I don't know that we're going to get agreement, but do you agree with her? And he said, well, technically she's right. And I could see it. Okay, and he just said, well, why are we even talking about it then?
Right.
And from that point on, he worked very hard within the Democratic caucus. I actually spoke to the caucus at one point, and he stood up and said, I don't know why we're even talking about this. It doesn't add a penny to the deficit. So the American people understand that it doesn't add to the deficit. They see their contributions taken out of every paycheck. They get it. And when you can really talk to people away from their donors, the elites start to see it too.
Yeah, that's a great moment. I'll tell you mine, by the way.
Okay.
Which is, people always say, aren't they just IOUs?
Yes.
The money that's in the Social Security Trust Fund, some 2.8 trillion is it now?
And just to interject for a second, the first person to call it an IOU, 1936, Alf Landon running against Franklin Roosevelt. He was the first, so they don't even come up with new arguments. They just are zombie lies that go on, but go ahead.
Yeah, there was a journalist named John T. Flynn in 1937, 1938 was saying all the same things they say today. But, and you or I, normally those of us who've been arguing this for a long time, we'll get very technical and we'll say, no, they're legally binding financial instruments. We'll get into the whole technical, they're just like a treasury bond, whatever we want to say.
They are a treasury bond, but yes.
They are a treasury bond. But a Fox News radio host was interviewing me when I'd written something about this, and he said, aren't they just IOUs? And I don't know why I said this, but I said, don't you pay your IOUs? Do you want to shaft old people on their IOUs, seniors on their IOUs? And he said, I never thought about it. You're right. It was like the Max Baucus moment. It's like, it's a bogus, not only are they not just IOUs, it's an entirely bogus argument, because if you have an IOU, you're morally obligated to pay it, aren't you?
And in this case, legally obligated, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I think that's right. And the genius of Franklin Roosevelt and the genius of this program and the reason it is so popular is because it embraces basic American values, like you have a debt, you pay your debt. And the same kind of thing, I've talked on conservative shows, and I talk about, you've earned these benefits, you've been paying in, and often the host will say, yeah, I've been paying in since I was 16. I said, absolutely. So it appeals to all of us because it provides basic economic security that's so important to all Americans.
Yeah, so I think now whenever someone says they're just IOUs, we should just say, okay, my friend over here is on record as wanting to stiff people for what they're owed, for what they've been paying in for a lifetime. So let me ask you a kind of final topic. What do you think, we had the sort of Peterson years where we had this consensus of, you know, the Obama White House people and Republican, mainstream Republican people. Now there are no mainstream Republicans, right? They've gone crazy to the right. And the Democrats, as you said, they're changing. They're shifting on this issue. Maybe some more quickly than others, maybe some we'd like to push, but they're shifting. What do you think? So we know what the battles have been like over the last 10 years, let's say. What do you think the big battle is going to be to get the truth out over the next 10 years? Is it the same one? Is it's not really contributing to the deficit? You've been lied to about the financing, or is there going to be a different kind of struggle going forward?
Well, there's sort of, if I can unpack that question a bit, there is a threat, a danger to the program, which is it won't be an argument at all. It'll be done behind closed doors. You're right, the Democrats understand the importance of Social Security. The American people understand it. The Republicans now control the White House, the House, the Senate. And they are trying to use all kinds, they're trying to do it right now with this Trump care, the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. They raid Medicare, they destroy Medicaid. They are talking about going after Social Security. So one of the fights and the threats is it'll be done secretly. Right. But the other piece is exactly what you say. We've got to get more and more people understanding that this is a question of choice. The other side wants to make it about, oh my gosh, we can't afford it. And if you buy that, then that's, you know, fait accompli. And we've got to completely remind everyone that we're a democracy. They may have most of the money, but we each have a vote. And we vote for what we believe in, and the values and the program are what we want.
Can't add anything to that, except that I agree 100%. So Nancy Altman, President of Social Security Works and Chair of the Pension Rights Center, as always, great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you again.